longevity, and health through lifestyle, knowledge, and environment. Number 1532, the 11th of February 2026. Gerald C. EclaireMD Foundation. Category: Food and Health. Preface: I had a dream last night. In my dream, my mother was preparing one of my favorite foods, dumplings that originated in China. I am a Chinese American. My earlier Americanized eating style brought me both enjoyment and serious health problems, including obesity and diabetes. After I began self-studying food science in early 2010, I occasionally found myself missing certain traditional Chinese dishes that I ate in Taiwan, especially the dumplings prepared by my mother. After developing diabetes, when I prepare Chinese dumplings, I use raw flour to make the dough for the skin. However, I intentionally roll the dumpling skins thinner than usual. When eating, I consume only about half of the dumpling skin portion and leave the remaining half on my plate to reduce my carbohydrate intake. For the filling, I mix various fresh vegetables with a small amount of red meat. Rather than using meat alone, I chop everything into small pieces to ensure even cooking, chewing, and better ingredient control. I do not add sugar. I use only a small amount of soy sauce, preferably from Japanese manufacturers. Over the past 3 decades, I have owned property in Tokyo and lived in Japan for extended periods. Based on experience, I have developed trust in Japanese manufacturing standards and product transparency. I avoid products that may contain unnecessary additives. After shaping the dumplings by hand, I boil them in plain water until fully cooked. I do not fry them or add oil. Through this careful preparation method, I can satisfy my memory of home-cooked food prepared by my mother while still protecting my present metabolic health. And this way, I balance cultural enjoyment with disciplined management of obesity and diabetes. Introduction: I have a personal sensitivity toward concentrated political and economic power structures because I came from a poor but highly educated family. My early years were marked by struggle and self-support. Except for 2 engineering professors at Iowa and Mid who changed the trajectory of my life. They shaped my professional path, but not my health, since they were engineering scholars rather than health experts. My father was among the first group of German-trained surgeons in China around 100 years ago. I grew up in Taiwan during 1947 to 1968, in the post-World War II era, when society was materially limited and resources were scarce. Most of our food consisted of fresh vegetables purchased directly from local farmers. Crops were planted and harvested by hand. Meat was limited, expensive, and not regularly available. My father's monthly salary was about $140 to support a family of 7 members. That averaged about $20 per person per month. We lived modestly. My mother was a nurse during the war years. We grew up in a medical family surrounded by care, knowledge, and strong principles, but within a materially constrained environment. Because of this background, I developed strong values: education, family bonds, hard work, thrift, and humanitarian responsibility. When I came to the United States at age 20 to 21, I weighed about 140 pounds with a BMI of 20. I arrived in Iowa City with $200 in my pocket. In the second month of my American life, I began working as a busboy, earning 50 cents per hour to support myself. For the first 9 years, I combined academic study with manual labor jobs as a waiter or janitor to finance my education. Around age 30, after moving to San Francisco as a professional engineer, I weighed 155 pounds with a BMI of 2. Between ages 34 and 40, while attempting 6 high-tech startups, my weight increased to 200 pounds with a BMI of 28.7. Chronic stress, financial uncertainty, an abundant calorie-dense food environment, and reduced physical activity contributed to this change. By age 42, I had developed obesity with a BMI of 31 and type 2 diabetes with EG over 300 mg DL and HbA1c above 13%. Between ages 47 and 57, I suffered 5 cardiac episodes. At age 63, I experienced kidney failure, severe neuropathy that nearly led to toe amputation, and retinopathy that nearly caused blindness. Despite holding 7 degrees from 6 universities across 10 disciplines, I was not sufficiently attentive to my own metabolic condition. I finally woke up in 2010, at age 63. When my physician recommended kidney dialysis, I decided to fundamentally change my lifestyle, including portion control, food quality, persistent daily walking, proper hydration, improved sleep duration and quality, and stress management. I adopted a disciplined commitment to practice these behaviors every single day without exception, for more than 40 years. The U.S. government has revised its dietary guidelines every 5 years as scientific understanding evolves. Earlier editions reflected the knowledge available at the time. In retrospect, long-term metabolic overload and the health impact of highly processed food were not always emphasized as strongly as they are today. Meanwhile, modern healthcare systems developed with strong capabilities in diagnosis and treatment, particularly for acute conditions, prevention, which requires sustained behavior change across populations, is inherently more complex and difficult to implement consistently. Within this broader environment, my own health decline occurred. It was not caused by a single factor or institution, but by a combination of personal choices, work stress, cultural food patterns, and delayed lifestyle correction. As a result of long-term lifestyle imbalance, I went through 8 near-death or near-crippling experiences. My 9th near-death event on June 21, 2025, a hemorrhagic stroke near the Pontine region, was associated with chronic vascular damage and an acute blood pressure spike of 175 Hg. At age 63 in 2010. I completely changed my lifestyle trajectory. That decision altered my survival curve. Based on my analysis of more than 4 million personally collected data points covering biomarkers and lifestyle variables, I believe that without correction I might not have survived beyond my late 60s. I am now 79 years old. I am still alive, still thinking, still researching and working, still speaking clearly about lifestyle principles. I briefly mention leadership context only to acknowledge that public health policy is influenced by those in positions of authority. Both Donald Trump and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. come from financially secure and influential families. Donald Trump was born into a real estate family and educated at the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was educated at Harvard University and the University of Virginia School of Law, later earning a Master of Laws degree. Because both individuals come from financially secure backgrounds, their personal livelihood does not depend heavily on political fundraising or industry support. This financial independence may reduce certain economic pressures that often influence policy direction. As a result, it can create conditions where scientific evidence, including updated understanding of food and metabolic health, is more likely to be reflected in national dietary guidelines. Ultimately, public health outcomes depend not on political identity, but on whether evidence is translated into clear policies and consistently implemented. A recent example is the 2025 to 2026 U.S. Dietary Guidelines, which include more explicit emphasis on food, diet, and metabolic health, particularly for senior Americans. After reading this edition, I realized that I had already been practicing many of these principles independently since 2010, without formal guidance from clinicians or institutional recommendations. When I was 63 years old, lifestyle change was the decisive factor in my survival. Medications, physicians, and institutions play essential roles in stabilization and acute care. However, in my case, long-term metabolic improvement required behavioral changing and disciplined execution. My concern is not political alignment, it is measurable health outcome. I survived because I corrected my lifestyle behavior using longitudinal data, engineering logic, and consistent daily practice. At 79, I remain alive because of the decision I made at 63. I will continue speaking clearly about lifestyle principles, not to criticize systems, but to emphasize prevention as an indispensable complement to treatment. I nearly died while participating in a traditional healthcare system whose financial structure is largely driven by revenue from procedures, hospital services, and pharmaceutical interventions rather than long-term metabolic prevention. And such a profit-driven framework, reactive treatment is naturally emphasized, while sustained lifestyle correction receives less systematic attention. I survived only after restoring my metabolic balance through structured and disciplined lifestyle changes that had not been sufficiently prioritized in my earlier medical experience. Examples of my lifestyle details: food philosophy and kitchen practice. Since 2010, my kitchen has contained no processed foods. I eliminated rice and flour-based refined products and replaced them with simple and processed foods, mainly fresh vegetables, seafood, and milk-based products. I reduced my total food portion from approximately 150% of prior intake in 2010 to about 42% in 2025. This portion reduction fundamentally changed my metabolic trajectory, beginning with body weight improvement. My refrigerator stores primarily fresh vegetables of different colors, excluding potatoes, which I classify as another form of rice or bread due to their high starch content. For protein, I consume cheese, eggs, tofu, seafood, and modest amounts of pork and beef. I enjoy red meat. However, some livestock production systems use growth hormones and antibiotics, which may enter the human food chain. Similar concerns extend to certain farm fishes. Therefore, I prefer wild-caught fish whenever possible. Carbohydrate control and glucose management. Before 2010, a single meal often contained more than 100 grams of carbohydrates and sugar. After lifestyle correction, I reduced this to approximately 30 grams per meal. With this intake, my peak post-meal glucose is around 160 milligrams dl. After disciplined post-meal walking of 5,000 to 6,000 steps for 45 to 50 minutes, glucose returns near 100 milligrams dl at 2 hours after the first bite of my meal. Through this daily routine, I reduced my HbA1c from 13% in 2010 to a stable range of 6 to 6.4% after 2017, without diabetes medications, during the 16 years from 2010 through June 2025. My body required no medications at all for my chronic conditions. After my recent stroke, I began anti-seizure therapy, which I accept as necessary in that situation. I sometimes reflect that achieving metabolic control without long-term medication challenges conventional expectations, but my intention has never been opposition. My intention has been restoration of my physiological balance. Discipline and daily execution. My lifestyle method is not complicated. It is repetitive and disciplined, similar to structured training used by musicians and athletes. Food portion control. Carbohydrate control, persistent walking, sufficient hydration, sleep regulation, stress management. Consistency produces stability. Chemistry, medications, and root causes. My past experience has made me cautious about relying too much on man-made materials created mainly for convenience. Many modern products, such as plastics, are very useful, but they do not break down easily. They stay in the environment for a long time and gradually pollute our soil and water. Only in infectious diseases are antibiotics clearly necessary and life-saving. In metabolic disorders, medications effectively manage symptoms and reduce risk, but they do not replace the need to correct long-term lifestyle imbalance and metabolic overload. This perspective explains why I chose to focus on mathematics, physics, engineering, physiology, and pathology instead of pharmacology. I understand that this reflects my own personal preference. Chemistry is a powerful and important branch of science, and it has produced many life-saving treatments. However, my main focus has been on correcting the body's structure and daily habits rather than relying mainly on drugs. Alfred Nobel's legacy reminds us that innovation carries dual consequences. Technology can benefit humanity when applied wisely. It can also create unintended challenges. Modern chemistry has enabled both therapeutic advances and highly processed food systems. The responsibility lies not in the discipline itself, but in how society applies it. Scientific achievement should ultimately support long-term biological stability and human survival. Personal position. A Chinese philosopher, Lao Tzu, wrote that human life is limited while knowledge is limitless. A human lifespan rarely exceeds 100 years. Knowledge expands endlessly. No individual can master every discipline. Selection is necessity. I chose mathematics, physics, engineering, and pathophysiology. This was not rejection of chemistry, but allocation of finite time. Very few individuals attempt to cross as many disciplines as I have explored. Even so, time remains limited. I made the decision at age 16 to prioritize certain fields. It was a strategic choice, not ignorance. I am not a prize winner. I am not a government official. I am simply a human being who nearly died and then changed his life path. I can save only my own life. By presenting my measurable data from disciplined lifestyle engineering, I hope others may preserve theirs. Disclaimer: I write this paper not for fame, but to share what I have learned so others can understand their health, prevent disease progression, and live longer, healthier lives. This content is provided for educational reference only and does not constitute medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered, edited, or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights belong to the author. Gerald C. HSU. This content is provided for educational reference only and does not constitute medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered, edited, or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights and copyrights for this article and its related materials belong to the author, Gerald C.